And now it is my honor and my privilege to welcome Reverend Ogun Holder for the Power of Will, Part 2, From Will to Wow. And if you don't know already, Reverend Ogun is an ordained unity minister, a certified spiritual coach, and co-founder of Project Sanctus, a safe, brave online space to discover and be our holiest self. And in so doing, together, create a world of equanimity, justice, and love for all. His many titles over the years include speaker, teacher, author, podcaster, blogger, musician, parent, social media consultant, a WEPSS Certified Enneagram Instructor, and a self-proclaimed geek. And we just love you so much, Reverend Ogun. Welcome back.
Thank you. Love you too. It's good to be back. Of all of those titles you just read, the one that I love the most, that continues to challenge me the most, is being a parent. All the parents out there, you know what I'm talking about, right? Nothing like it. I tell people, you know what it is, when people ask me, what is your most like profound, impactful spiritual practice? I'm like, oh, it's parenting, beyond doubt. 20 years later, my daughter's 20, she still challenges me. I am honored, thrilled to be back here for part 2. Last week was from want to will. This week is from will to wow. And just to do a quick recap in case anybody missed the talk last week, but you can always see it online. We begin by defining the power of will. We've been seeing it in the slides and so on. It's our ability to choose, to decide, to command, direct, determine. In fact, Charles Fillmore speaks of it, of the power of will is the power that moves all the other powers into action. So in many ways, the power of the will is practically the most important one of the 12. We don't need to rank them in order of which one's most important, but this one is sort of like, the catalyst that springs all the others into action. Is through the power of will we can choose what we believe, which brings in our power of faith. We can choose what to let go. Brings in our power of elimination. So will is very vital, and like spiritual principles and other spiritual laws, these powers within us are, or what I like to call, again, agnostic. In other words, they're always at work. They're always being used. They don't care how they're used. And we're either using them consciously or unconsciously. And we're either using them from either fear or love or lack of abundance. Last week, I talked about the states and stages of consciousness. So the powers are being utilized, but the outcomes that we see are going to be dependent on what state and stage of consciousness we are residing in, because that's where the powers are getting their direction from. Okay, so when we say we live life from the outside out, from the inside out, this is what we're talking about, from the inside out. So the choices that we make come from whatever level of state of consciousness we're in. Is where the powers are directed, and as we choose, our life reflects the outcomes of those choices, right? So that's what we're talking about here. So for me, my goal, my effort is always to remain centered in my Christ consciousness, and let the powers do their work. So for example, if I'm going to want to see the outpicturing of my life in a love and abundant way, I have got to stay in a consciousness of love. I've got to stay in a consciousness of abundance and not worry about what's happening outside of me. And when I say not worry, I don't mean we ignore what's going on outside of us, but in our direct life experience, if we want our direct life experience to be one that supports us, one that reflects what we truly want to live in, then we've got to turn our focus inwards and always be working on evolving, growing, centering in our Christ consciousness, raising our states and stages of consciousness, if you will, lifting our stages of consciousness, and be clear about what state that we are residing in. So for me right now, a lot of my focus is around abundance consciousness. Okay, and abundance consciousness is not around, hey, can I manifest the perfect thing out there? I spoke about this last week a little bit. It's about realizing that if I want my life to be a life that I want to keep showing up for, if I want my life to be one that every morning I wake up, I go, yeah, I get to do this again today. If I want my life to be that experience, I've got to always be living in a consciousness of love and abundance, and not fixated on manifesting what's outside of me. That'll take care of itself, because these laws are always at work. But before we move on to that, about how do we, because that's what the focus of today's talk is going to be. How do I stay in that place, right? How do I stay in that consciousness of love and abundance all the time? Before we move on to that, I think it's important to have a little conversation about something that usually comes up when we mention the power of will. Those of us who were raised in any sort of traditional Christian church experience are very familiar with the idea of God's will, right? Now, even though we come to unity and we realize God's not the old man in the sky anymore, and we've sort of let go of that idea, we sort of don't entirely let go of it, right? How many times in unity have you said or heard, I'm open to what Spirit has in store for me. I'm open to Spirit's will, Spirit's guidance, Spirit's instruction. I'm here to figure out what my divine purpose is. All these words that we sort of use to kind of, not acknowledge the old man in the sky are still words that reflect an idea of there's something outside of me planning for me, has a plan for me. When we say I'm trying to, so here's a great example. I was teaching an SEE class a couple of weeks ago, and we were having a conversation around where are we in terms of our comfort level with death. And one of the persons in the class said, I'm uncomfortable now only for the very reason that I don't know that I've figured out what my life and divine purpose is. Once I figure that out and then I could live that, then I'm fine. And I said, well, that's fascinating. So are you saying that there's some purpose that you have to follow and live up to and meet? They say, yes, I'm sure Spirit has a plan for me. Right? Same language and same intention. Okay. So back in the day, those of us who were not raised in unity, we call that God's will, right? The divine plan. There was this predetermined idea of how you were to show up in the world and express who you are as God. And the Bible was no help, because we see Jesus talking about it, in that what we call the Lord's Prayer. He says, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." Even in the Garden of Gethsemane, right before his crucifixion, he says, "Not my will, Lord, but yours." Okay, so we have this idea that supports there's something out there that's kind of mapped things out for us. Oh, by the way, if we don't get it in this lifetime, we got to come back in the next one and figure it out, right? So we be on this wheel of being reincarnated till we figure it out and then live it. Okay, so I want to invite you to know that maybe that's not what's happening here, right? Because if we in unity truly believe that God is principle, universal law, as in not some sentient deity, then there is no prescripted plan. Who's writing the plan? There's nothing writing the plan for us. There is no plan, okay? The only thing that we are always invited to is to be the best expression of the Christ consciousness that we are. And guess what? There is no right or wrong. There's no pass fail. There is no test, right? It's however you choose to do it. If you've ever read the book Divine Audacity by Linda Martella Whitsett, it's a great book about the 12 powers. I think one of the best one that's out there. No disrespect to Charles Fillmore and his 12 powers book, but that's a tough read. But Linda Martella Whitsett, she really lays it out. And in her book, she teaches that, or writes that the word will, when we translate it from the Greek, which was what the original scriptures were written in, the word is thelema. And that means a determination by choice or by inclination. Okay, will is a determination by choice or inclination. In other words, it is our purpose that we decide. That's our choice, right? And our inclination is really desire or pleasure, what gives us joy. So will, when you think about it that way, is we choose the things that give us joy. Right? That's our, on this 5 sensory plane, usually what we choose. We choose the things that give us joy. And in doing so, when we choose in the direction of the things that give us joy, remember these 12 powers are always at play. So when we are choosing from that direction, then guess what? We're gonna be led towards things that support that. So if there's any God's will, it is us choosing from our divinity. There's no prescribed plan. We could take this even to another level. When Jesus was saying the Lord's Prayer, and he says, "On earth as it is in heaven," metaphysically, when we look at heaven, we have actually two things we refer to here, and Paul Hasselbeck writes about this in Heart-Centered Metaphysics. We got the kingdom of heaven, and we got the kingdom of God, and they're not the same things. The kingdom of God metaphysically refers to the absolute, all that God is, all that we have yet to, well, we really can't understand from a 5 sensory perspective. It is all that God is, the fullness of God. Okay, but the kingdom of heaven is our relative perception and understanding of that. And it's based again on whatever state and stage of consciousness we're at. So the kingdom of God, all that God is, kingdom of heaven is our perception and understanding of it. So when Jesus says thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, that on earth as it is in heaven part is this idea of bringing that our consciousness as it continues to unfold and grow of what true oneness is into a 5 sensory experience. We're trying to bring the absolute into a relative understanding and demonstration, right? We can't do all of it because the absolute transcends the relative experience. But that's our work. Every time we do the work to heal, every time we do the work to live from our Christ consciousness, every time we do that, we're bringing heaven to earth. And that's the invitation. When he says in the garden, "Not my will, but yours," again, as I said last week, not living from our wounded places, attempting to not experience pain and fear again, but to choose from the true divine idea that we are. Remember back in the day, those wristbands, what would Jesus do? WWJD. I don't know if they made it to Canada. Did they make it to Canada? Did they? I don't know. But yes, right? What would Jesus do? So again, what would the Christ in me do? Right? Not the human part of me that's trying to avoid pain and fear, but what would the Christ in me do? Okay? Where am I choosing from? And when we choose from all the divine qualities that we are, that is us living God's will. Again, not something that God has asked us to do, because there's no God asking. But it is bringing that ability to choose into our consciousness from our divine center. Okay, so next time you hear the term God's will or what Spirit has in store, Spirit's idea for me, or Spirit's purpose, or anytime you have any of those phrases that kind of remind you about that put put the choices, the control outside of you, bring it back in, and say to yourself, God's will is my will. God's will is my will. Why? Because all that God is, I am. So if God's will is my will, I get to choose. I choose. Okay? And when I choose, depending on what state and stage of consciousness I'm in, I can either continue to create a world of discomfort, or I can create a world of wonder. That's what the WOW stands for, world of wonder. We have the ability to do that. We have the ability to create a life experience that's effortless, that really allows us to exist in inner peace and fulfillment all the time, where we remember and live from our true divine wholeness, and therefore walk in a state of worthiness. Okay, and again, it's turning that attention inwards and doing your work, and not fixated on what can I manifest. And I love that this was, you can't plan these things. I love that Paul Hasselbeck's absolute word this morning spoke to it. He said, at the center of my beingness is a place of perfect peace and calm. Whenever I need safe refuge, I turn to my inherent divinity and reach this place of tranquility where I feel secure and protected. Quick behind the scenes of how a pastor writes a talk. I did not look up Paul Hasselbeck's absolute word. When I heard it being read, I was like, oh, that's perfect. Got to put that in my talk right away. So thank you for bringing that to me, right? But it's the perfect story, because it connects me to I don't know if you saw the blurb that came up for the talk, but Jesus's miracle of calming the storm, right? In the Gospels, if you're not familiar with it, we read this story of Jesus is out on the boat on the Sea of Galilee with the disciples, and he's asleep on the boat, and the sudden storm comes up. And water's coming on the boat, and the disciples are freaking out, and they're trying to bail, and they're like, are we going to be shipwrecked? All this sort of stuff. And they look over, and Jesus is still sleeping. And they're like, how could he still be asleep? So they wake him up, they shake him awake, and say, basically, they're like, we're going to die. What are we going to do here? And Jesus wakes up, he sees a storm around him, and he says, peace, be still. And the storm is calmed, and everybody's like, whoa. Who is this that can command the weather, the elements, the waves, right? And we always look at that moment of him calming the storm as the miracle. And I said, no, the miracle occurred a few minutes before, when he was asleep on the boat in the middle of the storm. He was so clear about being centered in his divinity. He was so clear that his state of inner peace was an internal experience, and that nothing around him was going to shake that he was asleep when everything around him was raging. And when he became aware of what was raging around him, it didn't pull him out from his center. It didn't pull him out from that place of inner peace and calm. In fact, what he did was, if we truly believe in the literalness of that miracle, he was able to project that outwards. Okay, so what does this mean for us metaphysically is, again, when we stay centered in our true divine consciousness, when we stay centered in our divinity, when we stay centered in the truth of the principles of spiritual principles and laws, when we stay centered in those places, outside of us will reflect that. Outside of us will reflect that because of the choices that we make. In fact, when we stay centered, we don't even see the storm to begin with. All we simply see are opportunities for us to show up, like I said last week, as what we want to experience. We want to experience love. We see invitations to show up as love. We want to experience peace. We see invitations to show up as peace. We want to experience abundance. We see invitations to show up as abundance. That's all we ever see. And then when we see the storms, those storms, rather than have our fears triggered, What gets triggered is a yes. It's an invitation for me to show up. We actually become excited to see him. But it starts with us staying in that consciousness. How do we stay in that consciousness? You got your normal spiritual practices, you got your meditations, you got your all these spiritual practices. But I believe there's more than that, because you can't be meditating 24 hours a day, right? We got stuff to do. We got to go to work. We got to drive places. We got to go to the grocery store. And the true spiritual practices don't occur when you're meditating. It's when you're on the highway and somebody cuts you off. It's when you're at the grocery store and somebody cuts in front of you in the line. It's the human interactions, right? People are our greatest spiritual practice. So it's those interactions. So what do we do in order to stay in that centered place? So I have reflected back on all my abundance courses that I've taken in my lifetime. I've taken a lot of abundance courses. I've taken them all. I've taken 4T. I've taken Keys to the Kingdom. I've taken I forgot what Marianne Morrissey's course that she had a while back. I've taken Absolute Abundance, a very new one by a classmate of mine, Reverend Kendi. I've taken all these abundance courses, and a lot of them fixated again on the outward experience. And I'm like, that's for me, realizing that the focus always has to be inner. I said, all right, so what states of being do I have to reside in all the time, that I can do that in both my quiet contemplative moments and also my wakeful out in the world moments? All right, so I came up with these 4, and the handy acronym is FAST, FAST. So I called it Fast Abundance. When I stay in these 4 states of being, of consciousness, then I am residing in this abundance consciousness. So 4 states of being: forgiveness, acceptance, service, and trust. Forgiveness, acceptance, service, and trust. When I say forgiveness, I am inviting us to think of forgiveness in a new way. And the only forgiveness really that I'm thinking about is self-forgiveness. And when I say self-forgiveness, what I mean is loving all parts of ourselves, especially the wounded parts of ourselves. Remember last week we talked about, are we choosing from the wound or are we choosing from the scar? But many of us, even though we have these wounds, we have these pains, we have these things that have been inflicted upon us or that we've done to other people, those are the parts that we tend to want to avoid messing around with because they reignite the pain. And I say, no, those are the parts that we head straight for with love. Love the wounded parts of ourselves. That's the true lesson in forgiveness. Loving the wounded parts of ourselves. When we can send love, radiate love from our heart, from our crown chakra, when we send love to those wounded parts of ourselves, it starts to heal them. Why? Because, as Charles Fillmore said, love is a great harmonizer, bringing back together, bringing into harmony. Think of an actual wound that you have, right? You got to close that wound up. You got to bring the pieces back together. So this is what forgiveness does. And we have to do it for ourselves. So we love the wounded parts of ourselves. Acceptance, we have to accept every single part of ourselves. We have to accept every experience that we're in. Accepting doesn't mean agreeing with it or remaining in it. But acceptance is really about, what am I feeling inside of me right now? What am I experiencing inside of me right now? Not to resist that, not to fight that. Every part of us we have to accept, because as long as we are rejecting parts of ourselves, we are not loving ourselves. If we are rejecting parts of ourselves, we're denying our innate state of wholeness. So we really want to live out wholeness, we have to accept every single part of ourselves, especially the wounded parts of ourselves, especially the parts that hurt, the parts that feel abandoned, the parts that feel betrayed, all of those parts, the parts that when we think about them, they bring up fear and discomfort. Those are the parts we got to accept. Those are the parts we have to send love to and forgive. So that's forgiveness, that's acceptance. Then we have to be in service. Service simply means we're demonstrating love through acts of kindness towards ourselves and other people. again, ourselves and other people. That's being in service. That's allowing love to be made real, made known, made felt. And that comes from our innate ability of love, our power of love. But it's not just to have it, we got to put it into action, right? That's our fifth principle. So it's forgiveness, acceptance, service, and then finally, this is the big one, trust. Do I trust that the universe will always meet me at the point of my need? Because us humans, we whatever we think our need's gonna be down the road, we want to make sure we have it now, so that when we get there, we're good. You don't need it now if it's down the road, but do you trust that the universe will meet you at the point of your need in the future? That's what a lot of us struggle with. Because basically, if we're trying to meet a future need now and not trusting it's going to be there, what we're demonstrating is our lack consciousness. To be full demonstration of abundance consciousness is knowing that there is no lack, there is no there is no idea that there won't be enough when I get to whatever need I want down the road. It's knowing that it's already there before I even get to it. And the truth of the matter is when I do all the inner work and I choose to live in that highest stage of my consciousness, I'm really not going to have any needs. All the things that I'm imagining that I'm going to need in the future, more often than not, are coming from that place of, I don't want to be in pain down the road, the fear. So forgiveness, acceptance, service, and trust. If you really want to do some deeper work around this, I'm actually doing a workshop on October 9th and 16th. I don't have any registration for it yet, but if you go to, I'm putting the link to my website in the chat there, projectsanctus.com. Scroll down, sign up for an email, and be notified when the registration is ready. But I've done this workshop a few times with people, and it has thoroughly transformed their experience of how they walk in this world. Because again, it really invites us into a place of constant healing, of constant loving ourselves, accepting ourselves, returning to our wholeness and our worthiness, of being love in the world, and not worrying, because trusting that whatever we need will be there when we need it. I think I said this last week, by the way, worrying, misuse of the power of our imagination. There's another verse I want to leave you with. It's one of my favorite Bible verses of all time, and I think it really applies to the power of will. It comes out of Joshua, chapter 24, verse 15. Paraphrasing it, choose this day whom you will serve. As for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. Choose this day, the power of will. Choose this day who you will serve. As for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. So let's put the metaphysical interpretation on that. Each and every day, I'm using my divine power of will to live in and from my divinity. And in so doing, I'm going to become the best Christ and the best person that I can be. Every day, I choose to live and serve from my divine center. Every day, I am the calm in the midst of the storm. Every day, I am that light, that city on the hill that Jesus spoke about. And this requires us to turn our attention away from what do I need in the outer to not be afraid, to turn it inwards and staying centered in our divinity so that fear has no power over us. Choose this day who you will serve. Choose this day. Let's take this into a time of meditation. So if you are comfortable, I invite you to gently close the eyes. If you're not, you can keep your eyes open and just do a soft focus on some point ahead of you. And as you close your eyes, begin to turn your attention to your breath and your body. Allow the body to find a place of comfort, whether you're sitting down or lying down. And as you breathe, check in with the body. How does it feel? Any points of discomfort or unease? Just notice them without resistance, without rejection. Just notice and accept and breathe into them. And allow your attention to follow the in-breath and the out-breath. Notice the air and the expansion of the lungs as you inhale, and notice the outflow as you exhale. Notice the points of stillness between the two. Allow the breath to anchor us in this now moment, and if you become distracted by a sound, a random thought, a memory, an anxiety, even a sensation in the body, just notice them again without rejection. To reject any part of us is to try to deny our wholeness, so just notice them without judgment, and just return the attention back to the breath. And I invite you now to allow your exhales to be a little bit longer than your inhales. Perhaps breathing in on a count of 4, exhaling on a count of 7 or 8. With each exhale, allow the body to fall into a deeper place of relaxation and stillness. And from this place of stillness, we affirm our inherent power of will. We choose in every moment to focus inward. We choose to recognize the wounded parts of ourselves and love them. We choose from love, from abundance, from peace, recognizing that we already are all that we seek to experience. We choose to be the best Christ, the best person that we can be, as we live every moment from the divine truth of who we are. I am love. I am abundance. I am whole. I am whole. And so it is. And so we let it be. Amen and amen. Let's take a deep collective breath together. And I sit in great humility and gratitude for this opportunity to have shared with you, to connect with your communities, plural. And I look forward to perhaps one day standing before you in person. Love you all. Namaste.